My name is Michelle de la Hoz, and I'm the Executive Director of the Fifth Avenue Committee, and I'm really, really happy, thank you, and I'm really happy that you're all here. Just a show of hands, how many people were here at the February 2016 meeting? Okay, you're the diehards, you come out again and again and again. We appreciate that. That means that you care deeply about this supermarket, and so do we. So this is a meeting where the Fifth Avenue Key Food Community Stakeholder Group is presenting to all of you. Avery Hall Investments is not here. This is not their presentation to the community. This is the presentation of the Stakeholder Group to all of you. And as you can see, the Stakeholder Group has been made up of a very diverse and very active group of civic organizations and elected officials. Fifth Avenue Committee I mentioned, the Fourth on Fourth Avenue Committee of the Park Slope Civic Council, Park Slope Neighbors, Park Slope North Housing Development Fund Corporation, the BID, the Save Key Food Advocacy Group, which was started by Anita Bushell, and I know there are many folks connected to that group here tonight. We have tenant association leaders from Gowanus, Wyckoff, and Warren Street houses. Fury, Inquilinos Unidos, the Borum Hill Association, of course, Councilmember Brad Lander, Councilmember Steve Levin, and we have, of course, Assemblymember Joanne Simon, State Senator Velmanet Montgomery, Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez, our public advocate Tish James, our borough president Eric Adams, our controller Scott Stringer, and we had a representative from the de Blasio administration that participated in our stakeholder group. So since that meeting back in February, this stakeholder group has actually met more than 25 times. 6 of those times have been with Avery Hall Investments. And what we're presenting to you tonight, which we hope you support, is really the outcome of those more than 8 months of discussions between our stakeholder group and Avery Hall Investments. And at the end of the meeting, there'll be a feedback form. It's the only colored form that you have, so it makes it easy. It's the yellow or the orange form. And we're going to ask for your feedback about the revised proposal that we're presenting here tonight. We have 13 slides, and various members of the stakeholder group will be presenting the information about the revised proposal. And I just want to say that, you know, before we get too deep into this, it's been a real honor, honestly, to work with the group of people that we've been working with over the last 18 months. You know, this community is blessed to have very civically minded individuals and organizations that care deeply about the neighborhood, and I think that is one of the things that distinguishes us from other neighborhoods. And I think we're really clear about our values of inclusion, and very clear about our values in ensuring that the neighborhood is diverse. And we know that commercial spaces are part of that process, and businesses that serve the diversity of folks that live here are part of that process, and ensuring that folks can live here and live here long-term is part of that process. So that was really brought to the conversation today. So, I'm sorry, we have to like signal to change slides. So a little bit of history, because the history is really important here, and I'm going to, you know, so how many people lived in the neighborhood back in the 70s and 80s? Okay, so you guys know, right? There was an urban renewal area here. At one point, the city of New York wanted to build a campus of schools, but then the fiscal crisis hit, and basically the area laid foul and vacant for decades. And that created the Baltic Street Urban Renewal Plan. And that is the reason why that context is very important, because it influences the conversation today about the future of the Key Food site. Because the Baltic Street Urban Renewal Plan actually remains in effect for the Key Food site until 2022. After that point, a developer, any developer, could choose to redevelop the site as long as it's pursuant to existing zoning. And I'm proud to say that the organizing that led to that urban renewal plan and led to the Key Food supermarket being brought to the neighborhood and led to first-time moderate-income home buyers having an opportunity to own homes. That was the formation of the Fifth Avenue Committee, which is one of the reasons why we remain involved today, so many years later. Signaling. I'm going to invite up Assemblywoman Joanne Simon, who was very active in this process and a member of the negotiating committee as well for this. Round of applause.
Thank you, Michelle. So thank you. Okay, that was a little loud. I want to just also echo what Michelle said about sort of the honor of participating in this process. This is one of the reasons why it's such a great privilege to be representing the people of the 52nd Assembly District, because the people here really do care about their community and really do work together, even though, the set of circumstances that we might have are not necessarily those that we most prefer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of government today, and not in a broad context. I'm really going to not talk about that. And talk a little bit about the Urban Renewal Plan. Now, as Michelle mentioned, the Urban Renewal Plan is in existence until 2022, right? And that is something that is our best leverage for community, because we need the approval of HPD in order to build here. If, in fact, there was a proposal to de-designate the Urban Renewal Plan, it's a very complicated process, and it's one that is fraught with a number of pitfalls. And so just to give you a sense, at a minimum, to change it, let alone to de-designate it, you'd have to have the developer would need to seek approval from the City Department of Housing Preservation and Development and the City Planning Commission. And then the Planning Commission would refer the matter to the Community Board for an advisory opinion, which would, of course, be non-binding like any other community board opinion, although it would reflect, I think, a lot of the sensitivities and the sensibilities of the people living in the Community Board 6. So, but that information is very important because, as I said, the Urban Renewal Plan is our leverage. On the other hand, it runs out in 2022. And so we can't sort of sit around and not pay attention to the fact that now is the time for the community to come together and to develop this site in a way that works best for the most people. And those are the kinds of things that we'd like to talk to you about this evening. There was a stakeholder group that had a lot of conversations around this, and we have some very important information to share with you with regard to that. And right now, the role of government will be to bless what it is that the community wants. At least that's what we hope will happen. And so I turn this over now, I guess it goes to the council member, who will take care of the next part of the presentation. Thank you.
All right.
We all work very well together here.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. And it really is true. This effort would not have been possible without really one of the most extraordinary collaborations I have seen of community at every level, and community organizations and elected officials. And it's an honor to be a part of it. And we're going to mostly spend tonight going through the details of what the negotiations and the changes in the proposal are. That's obviously why you're here. But we did just want to take a step back and remind you how we got here and what was on the table, and why you and about 3 times this many people turned out a few months ago to demand that the community's needs really be met. So what happened was, with the supermarket on that Urban Renewal Plan site, the owner of the Key Food, who had been there for a long time, and seeing both that the end of the Urban Renewal Plan was not that far away, and also thinking about his own retirement and his family's needs, made some let it be known that he was open to selling the supermarket and the site. And so Avery Hall Investments, who you met at the last meeting, entered into negotiations with him and entered into a contract with him to buy that site. That would have required, as Joanne said, a change to the urban renewal plan, and so they reached out to HPD, to the city. This was something at the time that none of us were aware of, and negotiated with HPD a sort of letter of, kind of a negotiated letter in which the city said, we will take a look at removing, or amending, excuse me, the urban renewal plan if as you're starting to redevelop the site, you will include 25% affordable housing. And that was for the first time that any of us heard about it. And Avery Hall came to me and said, hey, here's what we've done. What do you think? And I said, first and foremost, I think you have to go tell the community about this. I can't tell you I think the community is going to be very happy about it, but you have to go forward and have a conversation with the community. Now, at the time, at that first meeting that they had with me, there was no supermarket space in it at all. It was retail space on the ground floor of this building. And they did ask, what kind of retail do you think the community would like to see? And I said, well, you've got to come talk to the community, but I'm pretty sure you're going to hear from them that what they need in that retail space is a supermarket. And they did adjust it from then until they came out here to see you. And from 0 square feet of supermarket, it went up to 7,500, a small supermarket or small grocery store space. And that's when we got here. We were still at a point when, there was a lot of unknowns. And because the community felt so strongly about this site, so strongly about the supermarket, so strongly about having a say on the development of this site, you turned out in overwhelming numbers. And that was the most important night in this process. We've had 20-odd meetings since then, and I think a lot of dialogue and negotiation. And I think there was good faith on both sides. But I think without the community's passion and turnout, you wouldn't have citywide elected officials in the room. You wouldn't have had the super, super hard work of everybody there. So that mattered in just an enormous way. And I also want to say, though we were upset at the time, and rightly so, with HPD and City Hall for having negotiated that letter before talking with us about it, they also heard the voices of the people in this room. And they joined the group as well. Daniel Abramson from the mayor's office has been at almost every one of those meetings. And they quickly made clear, we are going to work closely with the community. That we want there to be affordable housing, but we need to work with the community to meet their needs around the supermarket and other aspects of the site as well. So that's what got us here. And I think what we're going to do a little bit more of is just Anita Bushell is going to come up and talk a little about what you did beyond just turn out for that meeting. And then we'll go through and talk about the aspects of the presentation and take some questions about it. So, Anita, there were a lot of people, there were a lot of hands in the organizing here, but the fastest of them was the one that put up the petition that so many of you signed. So let's give it up for Anita.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming out. The thing that you need to know is that this community, as Tish James mentioned at our February meeting, this community came out. We, our neighbors and our colleagues, when we found out about what was going on, we were all pretty upset, to say the least, and we were able to just mobilize all of our neighborhood friends, colleagues, friends, family, dogs, etc., pets, cats, you name it, to come on out and stand outside in front of the Key Food in the winter and the snow and the rain, the sleet, the hail. Our neighbors came out and they were upset and they signed online petitions, they signed petitions on paper, and we got over 2,500 signatures. So you should be really proud of the work that you did to help us save our beloved grocery store. So let's see, raise your hand if you were here at the February meeting. If you signed a petition, you came to the February meeting, and you completed the survey as well. So that's a pretty amazing show of hands. So give it up to you guys for that. The other thing I just want to say is AHI, after our meeting, agreed to address the community's concerns, and the Key Food, as you know from the information that Brad and Michelle have proposed already, and Joanne, the Key Food Community Stakeholder Group came together, and our 3 goals reflect the community survey results, which we read thoroughly. Everyone worked very hard to listen to neighbors and to advocate for the community's needs, and we are clearly all of you continuing to do so. So thanks so much.
So really the three priorities that came out from the stakeholder meeting, from the surveys, and certainly from the community meeting were really, retaining a large, affordable, full-service, community-oriented supermarket with a long-term lease. That was certainly goal number one as part of the process. Having long-term and deeply affordable housing that would also be available to local residents, including those that have been displaced from the neighborhood, and having meaningful community input in the design and operations of the proposed development. So we took that information, and that really, the question is, what did we do with that, right? Because we had a lot of questions, and this is just one picture of the many stakeholder meetings, and these are some of the questions that we had. How big actually is the current Key Food supermarket? What does it mean to have affordable food in a supermarket? Woo, that's right. What does it mean? 421A, what is it? How does it impact this particular project? And whether or not we're actually going to see the project or see the affordable housing. How can we make sure the streets are safe for the school and for local residents? And how do we ensure that we have a legally binding agreement with this or any developer on the things that we care about? And there were about 20 more questions that we decided not to parade in front of you, like how do we ensure that whoever the operator is, thank you very much, Vannas, how do we make sure that they play the same music in the future supermarket as currently exists in the current supermarket that we all love? Yes, that was the subject of a number of meetings. But really we had to do a lot of research. We consulted websites. We called other operators. We found out that you may know that the Navy Yard, the Brooklyn Navy Yard, went through their own RFP process for a supermarket. They were very, very helpful. We called up, a number of operators in the area that had been serving, supermarket operators in the area that had been serving the area. We got legal counsel, honestly. We have the Urban Justice Center here. Adrienne is here someplace. I know there she is. Woohoo! And pro bono legal counsel. UJC is a nonprofit. They've also helped us secure pro bono legal counsel with Millbank to help with these negotiations. And quite honestly, we formed a negotiating committee, which was representative of the stakeholder group. But because the stakeholder group was so large, we knew that we had to have a group of people that could be a bit more nimble and translate all of this information into a set of priorities as part of the conversation with Avery Hall Investments. And on the negotiating committee, which is basically a subset of the stakeholder group, we had Councilmember Lander, Assembly Member Joanne Simon, we had Jade Marcus from the Fifth Avenue Committee, Ayana Mohammed from the Park Slope North HDFC. If you're on the negotiating committee, please stand up, actually. We had S.J. Avery from 4th on 4th Avenue of the Park Slope Civic Council, Eric McClure, who's not here tonight, from Park Slope Neighbors, and Mark Caserta from the 5th Avenue Bid. So really a tremendous group of folks who really did this. And the whole goal of all those meetings, honestly, was to develop informed positions and develop consensus among all of the members of the stakeholder group. And, it takes time to bring diverse viewpoints together. So with that, I'm going to, hand it over to Sabine, who I think many people know has been instrumental in helping with this effort.
Thank you. Ayana, come over here. Okay. So our goal, as we've reiterated a few times tonight, was to have a large, affordable, community-oriented supermarket with a long-term lease. And we're both stakeholder committee members, but most importantly, we're also Key Food shoppers. So Ayana shops there every day. But really, we understand this supermarket not only from our community roles, but also as residents and as shoppers. And we understand the impacts that this is going to bring. As was mentioned earlier, we really read through all the survey comments. This was very personal for us. I also have a young child that goes to this school, so I also understand it from the other end of the community impacts and really from the safety perspective that's going to be needed if we're going to have commercial trucks going through on the street over here. So I just wanted to really reiterate that, and I also want to acknowledge how much we know this is so deeply felt that I want to acknowledge the Pickneys, the family over here that previously lived at Warren Street houses. They now live in Harlem. They came here for this meeting tonight, and they remain key food shoppers. So through our research, we learned that the loss of affordable supermarkets is a citywide problem. You know, we've seen the Gowanus Pathmark and the Smith Street Met Food close already. We've learned that commercial rents here on the Fifth Avenue corridor are now around $85 a square foot, whereas supermarkets are obviously, they're larger, but they can't afford that. They pay much less per square foot. Another challenge that we learned through our research is that there's no one measure for affordable food prices. We learned about operators and zone pricing. They have different tiers of prices based on location, but that also varies. And we even had trouble determining the exact size of the current Key Food because the owner, Pickwick, would not directly engage with us. So ultimately, we were able to verify that the shopping floor space is 26,000 square feet. You know, we also learned that supermarket square footage is defined by the Department of Agriculture, but with the entire store footprint. So that includes shopping floor space, storage, loading, and mechanicals. And for that, the current Key Food is 30,000 square feet. And now, drum roll, the slide you've all been waiting for.
So, hello, I'm Ayana Muhammad. I represent Park Slope North HDFC. We're a low-income, affordable housing development located on St. John's Place between 5th and 6th Avenue. You've been here? Hello? Yeah, we've been around for a very long time, and we're representative of what we're trying to keep in this neighborhood, which is the people that created this neighborhood and not get pushed out. So, getting to Key Food, one of the things we realized about this neighborhood and what makes it so great and so unique to other neighborhoods is the amount of diversity we have here. We have income diversity, we have religious diversity, we have age diversity, we have cultural diversity. There's so much diversity in this neighborhood, and Key Food represents everyone there. They have everything from Fruit Loops to organic, you know, Fruitios or whatever they have, you know. Everybody can go in there and find the products that they want and not have to go to 20 different shops to find what you need, which happens to a lot of people that live in other neighborhoods. So through our negotiations, one of the things we were able to do is secure 22,000 square feet of supermarket space, as opposed to the 7,500 they originally gave us. So that's a huge concession. And that only came recently, because they originally gave us 7,500. Then they said, okay, well, we'll give you a little more. We'll give you 15,000. Then they said, no, we'll give you a little more. We'll give you 20,000. And we was like, listen, all right, enough of the stuff. Let's go for it. And they said, you know what? We're going to do it. We'll give you 22,000 square feet. So I would like to thank AHI for working with us that far on that point right there. We also find out, and to put that in perspective, we will be the second largest grocery store in the neighborhood, only to the Stop and Shop that's at Atlantic Center. So that's also very huge, because we will be larger than the Whole Foods and the Trader Joe's, and more than double the size of the current Associated that's on Fifth Avenue. So that's a good thing. Another win for us was we were able to influence how they would select an operator to come and bring who would run the supermarket there. And they will issue what is called a request for proposals, which you will hear us refer to as an RFP. And that's basically what they do to solicit companies who will come in to lease the space to be the operator for the grocery store. And some of the criteria that they have and the requirements of the RFP is that they meet the fresh criteria. So what that means is at least 50% of the space will be for food products meant for home preparation. So that will be like your non-perishables, cereal, beans, rice, pasta, and so forth. At least 30% of the space will be for perishable goods, including dairy, fresh produce, fresh meats, poultry, fish, and frozen foods. So that leaves 20% of the space to be for other mechanicals, for storage space. It would be for like laundry detergent and paper goods, things like that. Things you basically can't eat. Things you hide from your 2-year-old. And we also negotiated to take 5 high-end companies who we felt really didn't fit the needs of what this community is requiring, and that those places are Whole Foods, Citarella, Balladucci's, Grace's Marcus, and Italy. So those definitely will not be in the space. Yeah. So this is an area where you guys have more of a say and can actually get involved. They agreed with us to, and they will send the RFP to different developers and different companies that we recommend. So if you guys have any particular grocery stores that you like, that you feel represent the needs of this community, send us that information, and they will be able to send the RFP to those, and they will be considered to be in the space. Yes. Wait. Oh, yeah. Yes, some of the language that will be in the RFP will be the affordable price points that everyone was asking for, the variety of brand names and packaging sizes, and the ethnic products that we're so used to having, like the chicken tikka and the what is that? Yeah, Goya beans. You know, everybody here has Goya. Si es Goya, tiene que ser bueno. If you don't know. And we will also require the operator to meet with a committee of the stakeholder group at least twice so that we can interact with them and then further iterate what we need and what you guys have expressed to us. So, next slide. So currently the Key Food is at 30,000 square feet, where about 20% is given and there for their mechanicals, for their backroom space, for their storage and so forth. So the 26,000 square feet that we spoke about is what the actual shopping space is that they have there. Originally, they gave us 0. Then they moved to 7,500, and then we're at where we're at now, which is 22,000 square feet. So the figure does not include the mechanicals and so forth. They agreed to keep that separate. So when we have the 22,000 square feet, about 10 to 15% of that would be for non-shopping related things like the break room and storage and so forth. What else? And yeah, that's it.
Key Food.
Next, Jay Marcus and Pat Conway from Fifth Avenue Committee, staff member and board member, are going to come up and talk about the affordable housing. It's not, the supermarket wasn't the only win.
I think Jay went to get the other. Hi, I'm Pat Conway. I'm a member of the board of the Fifth Avenue Committee. As has already been pointed out, in the initial proposal that we heard in February from AHI, there was provision for affordable housing. But it was according to definitions of affordable that were at the higher end. And we were very concerned that that left out a large number of people from this community. So we don't need to let all of you know that there's a citywide need for affordable housing for very low-income families. And some of those families are housed in NYCHA housing. And our goal was to try to get at least some of the affordable housing in this development to come close to the income requirements for NYCHA housing. The other thing that I wanted to mention, just as background, is that when we start talking about affordable housing, we start talking about area median income. The area median income for New York City at this point is a little over $90,000. Here in Brooklyn, the area median income is about 35 to 40% of what it is citywide. So here in Brooklyn, the numbers are even lower than in the city. You all should have gotten some handouts that explain a little bit more detail about what AMI is and what that means in terms of the income that you need to make in order to be able to get into affordable housing. Does everybody have those? No. Okay, so we'll see if we can get a few more of those around. Okay, I want to pass this over to Jay to say what we actually were able to get from AHI.
So based on what we knew was the need, we really focused on 4 things that we wanted. Well, really 2 we wanted, 1 a clarification, 3 we wanted, 1 a clarification. So the first and the most important thing we wanted was to get some of the units at 40% of median, which is what we know is the highest need in our community, as well as what we had known included the people who were displaced when this area was rezoned, and a lot of the buildings on 4th Avenue in particular were purchased and people got kicked out to make way for those huge buildings. So they did agree to 10% of the units to be at 40% of median. The second thing we wanted is we wanted the affordability to be locked in, not just that they'll keep it affordable for 35 years, but at these income levels. So keeping that 10% at 40% for the long term. And they agreed to that as well. We also did want a clarification that they would meet the inclusionary housing rules, which is not something they're bound by at all. They're not getting any bonus here or anything to meet it, but we thought it was important, and they had indicated early on they thought they would be consistent, but they clarified, so there'll be no poor door or poor floor. The 65% of the floors, at least, maybe more, will have a mix of the incomes. That'll be on it. All the residents will have access to all the amenities, so it really is going to also meet those goals that we know is important for a diverse community, both in a building as well as in a neighborhood. The only thing we weren't able to those were the key victories, and those were really important. The only thing we weren't able to get was permanent affordability, which we had pushed for. They did agree to 35 years affordability, which I think they had initially indicated, which is good, and longer than a lot of developers would give that didn't have the requirements to do it. So we're pleased with that. So on the whole, 3 out of 4 ain't bad. So. And now I'm going to turn it over to S.J. Avery to talk a little about the design, traffic, and Mark.
Hi. Neither one of us are running for office, so you may not know who we are. Some of you have been bugged enough that you do, but I'm S.J. Avery. I live in the new houses behind Key Food. I've been there for 30 years. I'm also a member of the Park Slope Civic Council and the chair of 4th on 4th Avenue.
And I'm Mark Caserta. I'm the executive director of the Park Slope 5th Avenue Business Improvement Districts. And there are 520 businesses in the bid, so this is obviously a concern of ours.
Now, the thing that makes this slide a little different than the other slides that you've seen is there's no before and after, because there was no before. When the developers came to us in the beginning, they said nothing about traffic safety. They said nothing about community input. They said nothing about design issues. Well, those of us who have lived in the neighborhood, and I see a number of my Butler and Baltic Street friends here, we've been through this before, and we know what this is like. And so one of the things that we said very clearly was that we had to make it as safe as possible. Now, the developers have indicated that they will have an underground garage, which they talked about before, and that underground garage entrance and exit will be on Quisenberry, Gregory. We said if they do that, they need to consider making that a two-way street so that traffic would not be forced to exit down Butler Street and toward the school. I mean, there's a concern for the people with kids on the block, but there's also a big concern about the school. They agreed to that. They also agreed to putting up safety warnings at all of those areas, and we're going to be approaching the City Department of Transportation on that issue. The other thing that they did, which was a big leap for these architect guys, is that they agreed that they would show design site plans and the building plans to a smaller group of residents prior to the actual build. Right now, we really don't have any idea of, other than that first sketch we saw a long time ago, of what the two buildings are going to look like, what the setback's going to be. So this gives us, the neighbors who live on the street, and also the neighbors, our other commercial friends, to have a chance to look at that building.
Is there anything else to say? Oh, okay. So obviously, we're going to be monitoring the impact of the construction. We have a number of businesses on Fifth Avenue who are they're right next to that parking lot. So they're very concerned about that and the underground parking lot as it gets built. So we'll be monitoring. We have every reason to monitor this very closely on a quarterly and daily basis, really. And, for us, though, ultimately, after a little bit of pain, getting that larger grocery store anchor back for foot traffic and for the community is really important. So we're happy about that.
And we've learning from our past experience, we will, in fact, the names of the on-site construction people will be available to individuals. We'll have routine meetings with the developer, and we'll have the opportunity to talk to them on an ongoing basis. One of the things that we found with the construction of the school was if you have open communications and you can talk to people and you know somebody's going to respond on the other side, you have a much better possibility of a smooth product. Yeah, we're
Almost a question.
Almost.
Very close. Very close. Thank you, Mark and SJ. And we talked about this at the prior meeting, but especially having SJ and Pat, who have been at the heart of community organizing and the work Fifth Avenue Committee and the neighbors on this block have been doing for decades. They were very, very young when they started. Is just irreplaceable here, and having that kind of organizing has really been tremendous. So to summarize, I'm just going to summarize at a couple of points, and then we're just about to the place where we're going to take questions and answers after acknowledging our citywide and congressional elected. So you've heard everything on this slide already. Obviously, big and significant improvements from when you heard it the first time, from 7,500 to 22,000 square foot supermarket, 15 to a 20-year lease, no influence on operator suggestion to some meaningful influence. The deeper affordability, there were no very low-income units. Now there are 16, 35 years of affordability, and the commitments on design and traffic that Mark and SJ just talked about. And none of that would have been possible without a few things. First, the strong support and turnout of the community, clarity about what people wanted, and also good faith on the part of Avery Hall Investments, and so we want to thank them for being willing to listen to what people said and sit down and negotiate. Now, look, this is, everything like this is a compromise. We didn't get everything that we wanted in our best case scenario. Of course, we would have loved for an even bigger supermarket and even more influence on a range of the things. But we think the negotiating team, the stakeholder group, everybody who's participated, we really think it's a very good deal and a big, big win for community organizing. These are big improvements that would not have happened without the organizing and partnership work of everybody in the room and of all those groups. So, a couple more quick points. First, assuming the proposal has broad community support, it's going to go through the next phases of sort of the normal public process. The letter that HPD issued would be modified to reflect the new terms of the agreement, so it's in black and white in writing as much as possible in the agreement with HPD. If there are things that AHI has agreed to that for whatever reason can't go in the city's paperwork, the HPD agreement, they have agreed to sign a legally binding agreement with some of the organizations in the community to make sure. So I think that the city will be glad to put the affordability and the lease provisions in. They're probably not going to say no Citarella in a city document. So some of those things that were agreed to might be in a separate legally binding community document. They love Citarella on the Upper West Side. Maybe Italy. Italy is great if you want to go for a luxury Italy meal, but it's not. So that's one important, and then I do want to make one other important caveat that's important for people to know. When the AHI brought this deal to us originally, they were assuming that the tax benefit called 421A it was available at that time, and they assumed it would continue to be available. That's an affordable housing subsidy program that has existed for projects like this, and that they're counting on to be able to do this. If something like that comes back that enables a developer to build mixed income housing in that way, they will do this. If it doesn't, they're not going back to what they were proposing before. They're not going to build all market rate. They're not going to build something that does not have the supermarket, but they won't be able to proceed with this deal unless some version of that comes forward. So, there is still some risk here. If that doesn't happen, then it will just sit there like it is until the Urban Renewal Plan expires in 2022, when who knows what will happen. I am hopeful that there will be the right kind of subsidy program that enables them to build this deal, and they want to as well. They didn't go through all these negotiations to have a site sit vacant, but I think it's important that we disclose that and everybody know it is the case. So what we want to do now is I'm going to hand it over to Dave Powell from the Fifth Avenue Committee. He's going to acknowledge and give a quick chance for the citywide and congressional electeds to say hello. And I do want to say their support and the support of City Hall also was really important. So please say a big thank you to Comptroller Scott Stringer, Public Advocate Tish James, and Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez. They didn't just phone it in. They had representatives on the stakeholder group. They were at every meeting, and their support was a big part of what it made it possible to get this big win. So I am going to turn it over to, great, oh, good, okay.
So why don't we, I'm going to, Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez first. We're going to invite her up to say a few words. She's my old boss, so.
Thank you so much, and thank you all. If there is a lesson that we learned throughout this process, is the fact that we cannot underestimate the power of an individual, in this case, the community. And we have seen this time and again. We saw it with the process of the designation of the Gowanus Canal, when developers were opposed to a Superfund designation, but the community told the mayor and the developers otherwise, and today we are embarking in cleaning up, dredging, and restoring the canal for future generations. And here, it is important because we all know that the real estate market forces are driving planning in our city. And we cannot continue to allow for that to happen without keeping in mind the social and physical infrastructure. We need supermarkets. This is a community that is growing, especially here in Brooklyn. And we need to have healthy, fresh, and affordable food. And so that's still an open question, and I hope, and I just will tell you that we need to continue to be engaged to make sure that the developer brings in someone who will be able to provide affordable food for this community. Let me thank all the elected officials, especially Councilmember Brad Lander and Joanne Simon and their staff, Catherine, who I haven't seen. She's in the back working. Velma and Montgomery, Tish Jane, Scott Stringer, my staff, Dan Wiley, and you know, Brad Lander just said it. We need to compromise. We're not going to get a perfect agreement, but we can live with this one. And I hope that we can give lessons to Washington as to how we can get things done. You know, the art of compromising produces results that are beneficial for our community. So thank you again for all the work, the great work.
From the Congresswoman's lips to the voters' booth next week. I'm going to invite up our State Senator Velma out Montgomery, and then we'll go to our citywide elected officials. Senator, good to see you.
Good to see you too, my love. Good. I just thank you, everybody. This is really a victory that we all can appreciate, and I think we all deserve to give ourselves a lot of credit. Thank you. This is a community celebration. And let me say, I would be remiss if I didn't say a very, very special thank you to Michelle De La Uz. Michelle, yeah, she is my hero tonight. And I'm very happy that we have both citywide elected officials here, our public advocate and our comptroller. Now, why did I say that, point them out? Because I want them to see what we need. If we gave the power of Fifth Avenue Committee under the leadership of Michelle De La Uz to do a lot more of the development in our community, developing housing that we need, and negotiating on our behalf for these big development things, projects, we would be much better off. So I hope we can consider that, and obviously we're all going to work with you. Our Congresswoman, we've been here so many times together celebrating what the Fifth Avenue Committee has done. So I appreciate that leadership, bringing together the community so that we could come up with a proposal that I believe, as our Congresswoman has said, it lays the groundwork for a successful proposal, more than we started out with, and to whatever extent possible, and under Michelle's continued guidance and leadership, we will continue to fight for this kind of victory on behalf of the people that we represent. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Senator. I would just say, I am humbled by, to lead the Fifth Avenue Committee, and I really have to say this was absolutely a collective effort among the full stakeholder group and every representative. No one dialed it in for 25 meetings. No one dialed it in. So I'm going to turn to our fearless public advocate to come up and say a few words. She was here at the February meeting and fired everybody up and made sure we stayed focused from day one on the key points.
Thank you. A round of applause to Michelle De La Uz. So, I don't know about you, but I want to incorporate the law firm of Landers, Simon, Marcus, Mohammed, Avery, McClure, Caserta, LLC. That's a law firm. Okay, everyone got that? That law firm is going to negotiate on behalf of all of us in the city of New York. This is really about human scale development. What we are seeing all over the city is the loss of communities. And this is about preserving communities. And a community is more than just a building. It's about a supermarket. It's about civic activity. It's about the ability to see the sun. And it's about the ability to have our children play without fearful of being run over by a car. And this is about meaningful dialogue and a meaningful discussion and negotiation with a developer who actually respects the community. This would not have happened but for the power of the people. And so clearly you have given breath and life to the rally cry when people are united. How does that go? People united will never be defeated. You've given life to that rally cry. And so I really want to thank all of you. I used to shop here when I lived in Park Slope. I look forward to coming back and shopping here. I look forward again to all of those individuals who have been displaced, moving back into Park Slope. I look forward to ongoing discussions, but it's not over. We celebrate tonight. Is there champagne here? No champagne, okay. We celebrate tonight, but we've got to continue to monitor this project and monitor the developer. So we cannot just rest on our laurels and go home. The struggle must continue, but it will only continue if we all stay together and if we all recognize that this is our home and it's worth fighting for. Thank you all and congratulations.
Sabine mentioned that this is a citywide problem, the loss of supermarkets, and I think many people have seen that our comptroller, Scott Stringer, has really been on the forefront of that conversation citywide and ensuring that that remains part of the citywide conversation. So I'm going to invite him up to say a few words as well.
Thank you very much, and I want to just congratulate Michelle, Joanne, and Brad, and all the advocates and activists who are here tonight. This is a tremendous victory, but I will tell you, this is also the template to go back to something that this city and communities used to engage in. It was called community-based planning, when communities actually had a say in development. And when we looked at land use and zoning issues, we started with community planning. And that is what you showed here tonight, the skillful ability to take a problem and solve it and ensure that we're still going to continue to have affordability, both a supermarket and a community. And I think that what I think Tish and I see every day is as we travel the city, we do see neighborhoods being overrun by large-scale developments that are overshadowing and outrunning people who built our communities a generation ago. And whether it's Park Slope or so many places in Brooklyn, people moved into the community and nobody wanted to invest in it 20, 30, 40 years ago. There weren't speculators, there weren't banks, there weren't high-price, high-rises. It was really community that built neighborhoods. And today you were so successful that now they want to push you out. And we cannot have that. You're here to stay. You proved it tonight, and we will continue to work with you collaboratively. Thank you very much. And finally, let's get Nydia Velasquez to Florida because we got to win on Tuesday. Thank you.
Yeah, Tuesday's a big day for many of us. So with that, I know a lot of people have questions that they want to ask, and I just want to say, you know, obviously those of us that have been engaged in this and kind of like had our head to the ground and nose to the grindstone for the last many months, you know, we feel pretty positive about this, but the reality is you all may still have quite a few questions, and that's entirely legitimate, and that is exactly why we're here. We want to make sure that those questions get answered, and we, as you saw, we have these feedback forums for folks to share their feedback. So I know Dave Powell, Dave's going to run around. This is Dave Powell, Director of Organizing and Advocacy at the Fifth Avenue Committee. Absolutely,
Hello.
And he's going to run around and bring this microphone to folks so that people can ask questions, and any member of the stakeholder group should feel free to help respond to those questions. So
Thanks,
we'll start
Michelle.
on this side of the room, and then we'll go around.
We're going to make our way around the room more than once if necessary. I just want to remind everybody that we have a lot of people, a lot of your neighbors have questions as well, and this is being translated into Spanish, so in consideration of that, please keep your comments short, your comments or questions short and concise. And raise your hand tall so we can see you.
Hi, my name is Ann Williams. I live on the block. I'm an owner. Can you explain a little bit more about the two-way street on Kissenberry?
Sure.
Thank you.
Maybe Catherine heard that as a cue. Can you explain more about the two-way street proposal on Quisenberry Place? So I think, folks know now that Quisenberry is a street that goes south, and that you have to turn on the block, basically, in the U form. The idea, I wish I had a pointer, but the Avery Hall Investments proposal is to have a parking garage entrance, basically on the corner, go towards Gregory and Baltic. Right around there would be a parking garage entrance there, and the idea behind the two-way street is that if you're going out of the garage, that you could either take a right onto Quisenberry and Gregory Place and then take another right onto Baltic, or that you could take a left onto Gregory and then a right onto Baltic. Just that one part of the street would be two-way to facilitate not having so much car or truck traffic on Butler Street. So they basically have more than one way to come out. The idea is to reduce the number of trucks that, quite honestly, are coming by the school right here. That was the idea. And there's been preliminary conversations with the Department of Transportation about that.
Good evening. My name is Joanne Brown, and I'm also the vice president of 572 574 Walmer Street. And I also sit on the Community Board 6, and I also sit on the CAG, that's the Gowanus Canal. But my question is, okay, I see where you have that the person had to be making like $34,000 and on up. But what about the ones that's making like $15,000 or either
So
maybe
this is
about
an AMI question.
$18,000? So I'm just saying to you, you have some people that's making that type of money, not 35 and 25,000. Some of them is only making like maybe 15,000 or either 18,000 a year, and then they would like to want to move into those developments. So, would y'all be having a place? Would they be having a place for them to be able to move in there, or what are the procedures?
So that's a great question, Joanne. So a couple things. Right now, the city of New York has very limited options in terms of affordability for folks that are earning less than 40% of area median income. About 25% of the New York City population actually earns less than 40% of area median income. It's one of the reasons why homelessness is up in the city, because our affordable housing, our current affordable housing programs have not been able to target that level of affordability. You may know that the federal government has not been as generous as in years past with Section 8, and that is one of the ways to reach that level of affordability that Joanne's talking about for families that earn less than $25,000 a year. So this proposal, the revised proposal with Avery Hall Investments, will not, unfortunately, address that very real need that Joanne is raising. It is a very real need, and the level of advocacy there is different, and quite honestly, most projects do not reach that level of affordability, but it is a real need.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is just a quick question, which I think you just touched on, but what about parking? Is there parking there? I don't see that in any of that.
Yeah, so if you Catherine, if you mind going back to the slide that shows the overview of the slide. So as you know, there's the current surface parking lot that exists, and the revised proposal by Avery Hall Investments basically puts two buildings on the full site. One basically where the Key Food currently is, leaves a space for some kind of pedestrian promenade, and then there's a southern building on the other side. So there will be no surface parking as part of the proposal. There is underground parking that is part of the proposal, and I right now cannot remember the total number of parking spaces. 182, thank you, SJ. Subgrade parking spaces that would be available at underground. There are about over 100 parking spots currently. There'll be more. There'll also be units of housing above it, including there'll be 75% market rate, 25% affordable housing. So, and 50,000 square feet of commercial space. On I'm going to let Avery Hall Investments can answer questions later about how the parking will be structured. I'm sure that they will charge for the parking because it will cost them money to build it.
The issue of parking, short-term parking, discounted parking for people who are going into Key Food came up with the negotiating committee. And we really pushed Avery Hall on that. And basically what they said is that it's going to be some sort of franchise that's going to be doing the parking. So it will be up to the franchise. What we can suggest, though, is that this is an issue that you may want to raise when this proposal goes before the community board. But we did attempt to push it, and they said it's going to be a franchise. They have to make the decision. So
I don't know where Dave went. You're still on this side of the room. Okay. Pauline Blake, nice to see
Hi.
you.
Yes. My concern, Brad, is where you talk about the subsidies that would have to be in place in order to get affordable housing. And I know from my experience in this community that most developers try to avoid affordable housing unless they're getting these subsidies. What can we do as a community to make sure that after we've gone through this elaborate planning, that we don't lose affordable housing because there's no subsidy?
The Assemblywoman can come up as well, because no one will build all of the sort of projects that are 75-25s or type projects have always relied on that 421A program. There were some problems with that program, and I think we hope it improves, but right now there's nothing like it in place. I think those who want to see affordable housing developed are reaching out to try to figure out what we can do to get the best possible program in place. Some people want to go back to just what it was before. Other people want to make some improvements to the 421A program or come up with a new comparable program. And I think right now that's at the state level, which is why I asked our Assemblywoman to come up. At the council, we made some changes to 421A and said we could live with it in that form. And then the governor stepped in, and now we don't have it. And I think the question of how we get something back that lets this happen is one where we can keep lobbying together. We felt comfortable here that at least what we want is, if it doesn't come back, we're not going to get a project that eliminates the supermarket or that moves forward with only market rate housing. But obviously you can't make something happen, if it doesn't work to do. So I guess the question on sort of, what you think people in the room can do who want to make sure those resources are in place.
Well, obviously, one of the things, there has been a lot of organizing by tenant groups and others around eliminating 421A completely. And a lot of the reason for that was because of this tremendous abuses of 421A that had happened throughout the city. Less so in this area, but nevertheless, it was highly problematic. There was a proposal by the de Blasio administration that made some significant improvements to that, really significant improvements. And I know that the council had weighed in on that as well. What ended up happening last year was that because there was not an agreement on prevailing wage, the governor, it passed, except that it would not go into effect if labor and the administration could not work out the issues with regard to prevailing wage. That then did not happen, and so it sunset. And so right now we don't have 421A. So the question really is, I think the words 421A don't sound like happy words to many people. And there's a lot of people who really, as I said, very legitimate grievances about it, because it really was problematic as it was applied. So I think the task before us is to figure out how can we incentivize the creation of affordable housing in a way that makes sense, provides affordable housing, and isn't ripe for abuse in the way that 421A is. I don't know what that looks like yet. I do know that it will be something that will be the subject of much activity when the session begins in January. I don't have at this juncture any sense of what that will be. There's no proposals currently pending. Clearly, that's going to be something that's going to be in discussion, possibly as part of the budget. 421A itself was sunset in June of 2015, so it doesn't have to be part of the budget, but there might very well be part of the budget that would address this need for tax subsidies. So I don't really have a great answer yet, but I can tell you that both Senator Montgomery and I are very much aware of this, and we'll be working together within our houses to try and get some kind of subsidy that we can be assured will allow this type of housing to occur, to let this project go forward and others like it, because this is what we want to incentivize as opposed to the kinds of programs that 421A incentivized in the past. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. We're going to keep going with questions. I just want to remind folks, please, please, please do not leave without filling out your yellow surveys, and also to say, I have pens if you need one. A question here.
We're going to get to that side of the room, I promise.
Good evening. I have two questions. The first is, what is the time frame from demolition to construction? And the second question is, what is your intention with regard to the inundation of rodents, which is inevitable, and we've seen it before when this school was being built? And then who is responsible for the extermination process?
Great. So those are all great questions. And again, you know, this is the Fifth Avenue Key Food Community Stakeholder Group presenting. We are not Avery Hall Investments. But I don't know if SJ and Brad, because I know you guys, this came up quite a bit in the conversation. This is all construction impact related.
Oh, my people. Yes. And one of the reasons that we're getting this in writing from them is one of the things that they've agreed to is to share plans for rodent control, for trash control on Fifth Avenue. We know it's a problem whenever you dig. It was awful when the school went up. But we did learn something about being more proactive. And I mean, they're signing an agreement saying that they're going to be putting these plans to the community and also to the Fifth Avenue bid, too. I mean, those local stores have a pretty, a lot of concern.
To the best that I recall, they told us it would be approximately 3 years from demolition to the opening of a new store by the time all the construction is done. And look, that's a long time to go without a supermarket. Now, that secures 20 years of a lease with a supermarket, whereas what we have otherwise is after 2022, no supermarket at all. Well, we don't know when the start will be. That timetable, it depends in part on whether that 421A program comes back. So we don't have a start date. And no one in this room, not the community stakeholders nor Avery Hall Investments, control whether the current Pickwick Key Food operator keeps the store open. He has every right to keep it open until demolition begins. But that's obviously his decision. Whether he opens or closes is not part of the development question. I think the hope and the plan is that he keeps it open until the plan is ready to, the development is ready to commence. When that happens, then there's this approximately 3-year time horizon. There is the agreement to work closely with the community on all the headache aspects of construction, right? There's rodent management, there's noise management, what time are you doing it? Construction has all those headaches. What I can say is we felt like we had a good faith partner in this negotiations. A lot of developers would not have stuck with us for all these meetings and all this conversation. They would have said, our way or the highway. So we believe there'll be a real willingness to work with us. Does that get rid of all the rats? It doesn't get rid of all the rats. But it's a lot better to have. And then I guess I will say, I think I forgot to mention this, the one next piece of the public review process here is that this plan will go to Community Board 6 for a public hearing and Community Board vote. And Community Board 6 has done a good job of working on these exact issues of construction headache management. There's kind of no other way to talk about it. They do a good job, and they've got some models of having developers and contractors and community members work together to know what's coming when, be ready when there's a delivery, understand how to resolve the issues. And of course, your elected officials will be standing by, when the Department of Health needs to come out and do things, they're around to do it. So that's what we got.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I know there's a whole bunch over on this side.
Yeah. Anyone else in the back?
Well,
I'll come back.
we'll come back.
Come back to you.
These hands are getting sore over here.
So no affordability without 421A, right? Or equivalent? And then
No project.
No
There's
project,
no
yeah.
project without a subsidy. I mean, let me just give a little bit of background, I think, to help fill in the dots a little bit. So when Avery Hall Investments approached Pickwick, the current Key Food owner for the site, I don't think they were fully aware that the city of New York was going to require 25% affordability. So I don't know what price they offered Pickwick to purchase the site, but that is a factor in this process. And they're not getting anything, they're not getting increased density in exchange for that 25%. They are just getting the ability to go through a minor modification of an urban renewal plan. They're not getting additional development rights. So I think in order for the project to pencil out, in order for the numbers to work, they need some level of government subsidy program for the affordable housing. Again, I think it would be wise for all of what I just said to be confirmed directly with Avery Hall Investments. I'm sure the reporters in the room will do that. But basically, we don't believe the project, what they've indicated to us is that the project cannot move forward without some level of subsidy in place.
So the R6A it stays R6A and...
Great question.
to what
Yeah, so
extent?
we'll put
And
up
that's
the,
60
yeah. So this is actually an R6A, R6B zoning lot. And there was a zoning handout that was at the front. It's a mixed lot. It's a very large lot. And so what's being proposed is just would be consistent and subject to the existing zoning for the site. So nothing more, nothing more.
Any other questions?
Yes, lots of people with hands up.
I have three small questions. One is, how does the 22,000 compare to the 26,000, or is it compared to 30? That's a quick question. And then the two other ones is traffic. How will it be enforced? Because I think North Slope has suffered greatly since Barclays Center has been built, and traffic is not being enforced now. So any kind of traffic rules aren't, they're not being followed now as it is. And schools, which, our neighborhood has had a problem with schools. This is going to be 165 new units. So there's going to be at least 100 new children probably attending in the future.
Right, three great questions. So on the first one, if we could maybe, Catherine, show the slide with the graph of the different square footage of the supermarkets. So it's not absolutely an apples to apples comparison, because the current 30,000 square feet that exists for the current Key Food is when you walk in the store and you see the shopping area, but it also includes loading docks, mechanicals, storage room. The 22,000 square feet is the shoppable square footage plus storage, but not loading docks and not mechanicals, right? So it's actually an improvement on that. On the children, I mean, so obviously new development brings new people bring impacts, no question about it. It's my understanding, and perhaps somebody that was involved in the negotiating committee actually with Avery Hall wants to speak to the school concerns and the traffic enforcement concerns.
So on traffic enforcement, I would just encourage people to go to the 78th Precinct Community Council meetings, which are monthly and which Pauline led for many years. They have, it's a squeaky wheel gets the grease situation. They have limited resources, and when people show up and say we really need this particular kind of traffic enforcement on these blocks, then they come and do some of that, and there's just no way around that. It's the same kind of community organizing that got the changes that made this proposal this much better. Should that be necessary to direct resources? Maybe not, but that's how it works. So I would urge people to go to the precinct council meetings. On schools, I guess a couple of things. In addition, obviously, when the new PS 133 was built, it tripled the size of this school, and balanced between District 13 and 15. And it's a non-zone school because it's creating greater capacity for the whole district. The new PS 118 was not originally in the plan, but that's the school at 4th Avenue and 8th Street, and it added a few hundred seats. I don't remember exactly how many. There's a new pre-K center underway on 9th Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue, which will be another 180 pre-K seats, but those can come when necessary out of local school buildings and therefore give more capacity overall. And actually just this week was announced, or maybe it was last week, that PS 282, which has been an elementary and middle school, that the middle school is going to phase out there as part of a broader plan District 13 is looking at for its middle schools, creating more elementary school capacity at 282. So there will be the seats to accommodate the additional kids from this project. Now we have to work together over time because you see more new buildings going up on 4th Avenue, and there's the conversation we're having about Gowanus. So we need to be vigilant and keep making sure we get the new schools that are needed out in front, but I'm confident that for this project the capacity, the school capacity exists.
I just want to know about, we know where the parking garage entry is. Where is the loading dock entry, and how is truck driving traffic going to affect this thing? With one-way streets existing now, it's going to be rather difficult to.
We were advised that the loading docks will also be on the Quisenberry-Gregory side. We haven't, as I mentioned before, we haven't yet seen the drawing, and that's been a continued concern of ours about not having seen the detailed drawing. But part of the reason for thinking about that being a two-way street also had to do with the location of those loading docks there.
Thank you.
Seeing as many concessions as Avery Hall had given us, what's in it for them? Why wouldn't they just wait till 2022 till everything expired?
That's a great question. I mean, maybe someone who was in the negotiating committee wants to answer that.
Well, I think there's, a few answers, and now we're just guessing. I mean, obviously, if they weren't still going to make money doing it, and this is part of why, they were clear about the need for the 421A subsidy. Without that subsidy, the project doesn't work financially for them, and they can't do it if it doesn't. So, they negotiated in a way that, that will mean they make less money on this project than they would have without these agreements and concessions. But, they still believe it'll be a profitable project for them. I will say, and I think you could see this if you were here that night, as much as this was an angry room, and they are developers, they, are from the community, and I think they have an idea of their development projects as something that make money, but also fit into and meet community need. And if they could do it in a way that had our support, that they liked that better than doing it in a way that didn't have our support. And some of that is because maybe we could have defeated the project altogether, but some of that is because they want to do projects that both make money and meet community need.
There's the other possibility, which is that their option to buy with Quick Pick has a time limit on it, and in order to execute that, they have to act sooner than 2022. Or a combination of what Brad and I said. We're guessing. Again, reporters can ask them that question. Oh, sorry, yes.
Hello.
Hi.
My question is about employment.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering about the development of it. Like, will it be done union made, or is it private companies, or will people from the community be involved in the development? Will this provide jobs? Once this is all said and done, will there be people in the community working in the supermarket? And are there things in place for that to be set up? As far in the housing as well, also, will people from the community be the first ones to get in this affordable housing?
So two great questions. So on the jobs front, I just want to say that you may know that the current Pickwick is a union shop. It's local 1500, if I recall correctly. And they definitely participated in a number of our stakeholder group meetings and part of the conversation. That is an issue, honestly, that we did not secure commitment from AHI on, related to being open to union. I mean, there is a requirement in general that all managers and owners of property and projects and businesses in general not try to stop union organizing. So that's something that they will have to comply with. But there was some openness and some dialogue around engaging around local hiring that is part of the follow-up conversation with them. Specific to the affordable housing and local preferences, the one thing right now in the city of New York, when there are affordable housing lotteries, there is a 50% community board preference, so that would be community board 6 in this case. And AHI was open to another point, which was specifically advocating for a preference be added for individuals from community board 6 that were displaced, because I can tell you that Fifth Avenue Committee has literally worked with nearly 100 families that have been displaced based on the 4th Avenue rezoning, the North Park Slope rezoning from 2003. We don't know when this is going to be built, and so we don't know what exactly the community preferences will be at the time, because it will have to comply with those preferences and whatever fair housing rules exist at the time that it's built. But I can tell you that we'll be there advocating for both of the points that you're raising.
Hi, you mentioned earlier that there would be an agreement between AHI and the community. If there was ever a breach in any of those agreements, what recourse would the community have exactly?
I almost feel like I want to ask Adrian that question. Adrian, you want to come up and talk about what kinds of things normally happen when there's a breach in agreements, in community benefits agreements? Maybe this is...
So the short answer is that if you have a legally binding agreement and either party doesn't hold up their end of the agreement, you can go to a court to complain about it. So hopefully, obviously, that wouldn't happen in this case. I think that we wouldn't be at the point that we're at if Avery Hall was planning on reneging on their agreements. In this situation, what I think is more likely to happen is that maybe if 421A or its equivalent doesn't come through, the project wouldn't happen at all. I don't think it's very likely that 421A would come through. They'd sign this legally binding agreement with the community. They know that the community is very active and vigilant, and then they would do something that drastically departs from what they've agreed to. So we haven't actually written the contract yet, so that's why this is kind of a vague answer. In other contracts like this that the Urban Justice Center has worked on, there are sort of provisions that if there are goals that aren't being met, then there's some requirement that there be like a course correction. So in this instance, it might be something like if they're not meeting a certain goal, then they're required to meet with the stakeholder group again to sort of talk about why that is and to create a plan that will enable them to meet the goal. But we haven't worked out those provisions of the agreement as of now.
And let me first introduce Adrian, who is our lawyer from the Urban Justice Center, who was a fantastic part of the negotiating team, and we really appreciate the Urban Justice Center's assistance and Adrian's assistance. I'll also just underline what I said earlier. There'll also be a regulatory agreement with the city's Department of Housing Preservation and Development. So all the housing affordability rules, just like any other affordable housing project, are governed by a regulatory agreement that have strong enforcement provisions if any developers don't do what they're obligated to do under those agreements. And we're hopeful here that the supermarket elements, the size and lease term and some of those things could be included even though they're not housing issues. We have to work on that with HPD and the administration. And I shouted him out before, but it was before he was here. Daniel Abramson from the Mayor's Office of Community Affairs was also a strong partner. So we're going to essentially have there will be two different legally binding agreements, one between Avery Hall and the city outlining their obligations, and a separate one that covers things that can't be in that agreement because the city doesn't make sense or the city's not allowed contract for those things, like I mentioned, the agreement on who the operators can be, and that'll be, and some other things will be in this separate agreement, which has legal enforceability as well.
We have time for a few more questions.
Thank you. I'd like to know who do we leave the information for if we have the names of people who would be for supermarkets?
You can please put all suggestions for supermarket operators on this yellow, and I think there's also green colored forms. So it's on here. And if you don't have it now, but you want to provide it later, then Fifth Avenue Committee, Sabine Aronowski in the back, we'll hand you our business card information so that you can share it if you want to think about it and send information in later. We absolutely want that input.
And the last thing I want to say is that whatever supermarket comes in, we should really support it. Tell our neighbors, friends, and that we need to support our supermarket so it's so profitable that they wouldn't even think of closing it down like 20
That's
years
right.
later.
That's right. Support our local supermarkets. That's absolutely right. Come on over. I think we have time for 2 more questions.
Yeah.
Although we have 4 more hands.
Hi, I'm Mahalia Smith, and while I can certainly appreciate the negotiation that went on, nobody's talking about the infrastructure that is required for all this new construction that's going on. The infrastructure, which is so important. You have thousands of people moving into the community. 167 apartments does not mean 167 people. Hospitals, the sewer lines, the plumbing, the water, all those things should be taken into consideration. And going back to what the young lady asked previously, it's easy to sit here and say that we're going to make sure that they adhere to the agreement, but all we have to do is take a look at the Barclays Center. They were supposed to have hired local people from the community to fulfill their part of the agreement. But kindly remember, these developers have a lot deeper pocket than any community-based organization. So even if we end up going to court, this thing can be dragged on forever and ever. And we need to keep that in the back of our minds, and we really should pay attention to those things.
Thanks, Ahelia.
Hi, I just have a question about like the blueprint of the new development. Is traffic going to be running from Fifth Avenue through Butler Street? But I heard you say something about a
No.
promenade, or
Yeah, a pedestrian, I
like
called it a promenade.
courtyard. Like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
I just want to be clear.
No,
about
that's a great question, and thank you for clarifying. Yeah, so, I mean, basically, when the urban renewal plan happened more than 30 years ago, the through streets that were here on Butler and Baltic stopped, right? And instead, they basically combined the area into the new Key Food supermarket for the supermarket and for the parking, and they'd stop the through street. What Avery Hall Investments is proposing is to basically knit back together the street grid, but not for the cars, right? Oops. So this is the pedestrian promenade that they showed at the February meeting. And this basically is looking down Butler Street. So
Right. I did see that picture, but I just wanted to be clear on
Yeah.
that because I didn't go to that last meeting.
Yeah.
So.
Good enough. Yeah, and just so you know, if DNA Info actually, if you Google, Avery Hall Investments, Fifth Avenue Key Food, and DNA Info, they actually have the entire presentation from the February meeting on there, and you can see all of the renderings, and also you can link to it on the Fifth Avenue Committee website. Yeah, sure.
Catherine, can you go back to the slide that shows the blueprint? You see that slide right there. There were 2 separate buildings. Now, hold on. All right. You see where the Key Food building is over to the left, and in the front, you see where that middle portion is, the front of the parking lot? There's a sewer easement there, so they can't build on that part. So that has to stay open. So they've opted to keep that as a pedestrian plaza as opposed to opening up the street to go back and forth. So on the other side where you see the back of the parking lot, that's where the second building is going to be. Just for clarity.
The parking, for the new proposed development, it would be underground. Yeah, underground parking is what's proposed.
Hi.
Who has?
I got it. So my question is, it seems like this whole amazing negotiation process really was able to take place because of the urban renewal plan.
That's right.
And Key Food being part of that in the first place. And so I'm wondering, since we've been talking about, or we heard a lot of talk about how great this process was, what else is in this urban renewal plan, and are buildings and developments today in a plan similar to this one that will keep community input?
That's a really great question. And so, as it relates specifically to the Baltic Street Urban Renewal Plan, what's left of it is the Key Food site. I can tell you that. And it really specifies the use of the supermarket, and it also specifies the height of the buildings. The other part of the urban renewal plan was related to the homes that SJ and others live in, called Park Slope Village. That Fifth Avenue, it was actually Fifth Avenue Committee's first project that we were involved in for first-time home buyers. But those are now owned by the individual homeowners, and they're no longer subject to the urban renewal plan. The city's Department of Housing Preservation and Development is the keeper of urban renewal plans for the entire city of New York. And there are literally dozens and dozens of them all around the city. How they mentioned Barclays Center. Well, the Atlantic Terminal Urban Renewal Area, Atura, was an urban renewal site. Joanne knows well, the Hoyt-Skemmerhorn Urban Renewal Site. I mean, literally, areas where you see that the streets no longer connect for some reason, often were urban renewal sites. Basically, in the 70s, that was the way that planning happened. It's like, let's demolish existing property because it's a blight, and then bring something back, and then, and that's honestly how many different community development corporations got formed, because a lot of those urban renewal plans kind of got stalled, and they displaced a lot of people. But for this project, and specifically for this proposal, it's just the Baltic Street Urban Renewal Plan.
I have two questions, and one comment kind of expands on what she was saying about Barclays. The question I have is, each little project adds many more population, and obviously the school's a big issue, but what about our post office? Our post office needs a lot of work. For our so-called neighborhood, and it's a small post office for millions of people moving in. That's my one question. And my one other comment besides the post office, which is very important, is transparency. And I commend you guys for doing what you did, but how can we know these little secrets are happening when you find out? Barclays was a done deal when we all found out, and we fought for that. But the fact is now, thank you for doing this. You've done a huge deal, but I'm very nervous, post office, schools, and everything, to keep our standards up of what we really need here. Thank you.
So that's a great point. Just two things. One is, when the North Park Slope rezoning happened in 2003, it upzoned 4th Avenue, but it was a contextual downzoning on the side streets. And as part of that rezoning process, there was a full environmental review that was done that looked at what the impacts would be of the increased density and population. So presumably, that is part of the process, and it's, as many people know, the environmental review process is primarily a disclosure process. It doesn't really outline what the mitigations should be. That being said, the city is adding school seats here, is adding pre-K seats here, is putting in high-velocity sewer lines here. We can go on and on and on about the investments that are happening. Of course, many of those are happening after the population has come and the impacts have come. And I absolutely appreciate that point. And, you know, Joanne and I have the batter scars from Atlantic Yards all over our body. So I'll let her say something.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that everybody is smart to do is to keep Atlantic Yards in mind. I mean, Atlantic Yards was sort of the quintessential example of doing things the wrong way, in my mind, okay? It was a big area. It had the support of the mayor. And if there was a single thing that was done that enabled Atlantic Yards to happen the way it happened, it was the zoning override that was agreed to by Mayor Bloomberg at that time, okay? So by giving, which is kind of, you know, revisiting the old urban renewal technique, which is I'll sell you the streets for $1, and then you can take that. So, you know, through the work of a lot of us, we were able to achieve a result. Of course, the problem with any of that is by the time, you know, litigants get, you know, win in court, a lot of this is already done, and there were shovels in the ground, and they were building the Barclays Arena. But the housing was what it was that was used to get all the political support, and the housing didn't happen. And some of us worked together to sort of force that issue through planning yet another lawsuit that we think would have been very successful, and we're able to get them to agree to actually start doing that housing, and now you're seeing all that happen. But clearly one of the mitigations for Atlantic Yards was middle school. We knew then it wasn't going to be enough, but they agreed to that, and now they have agreed to make it a middle school instead of just a school. We do know that we need to plan differently, and the whole process by which planning happens or doesn't happen in this city really needs to be community-based and community-generated in a fundamentally different way. At the Hoyt-Schermerhorn, you know, urban renewal area, it was our idea to decide what we wanted, not fight what we didn't want. And that is very hard to get community to sort of think in that way. And that was a successful project, but there are not enough of them. Right now in the Gowanus area, Brad was instrumental in bringing people together for Bridging Gowanus, and we're working with city planning in a fundamentally different way than has been in the past, because that's an awful lot of land there. Development is happening. The land is owned. The buildings are owned by people for the most part. So, you know, owners of buildings can do a lot of things with as of right. And so we want to help address that issue and plan collaboratively with people for what we want and where we want it. You know, one of the things I did when I came into office was I did this big survey, which we're now sorting through these 600-something responses and trying to pull together that. But really, essentially, something that I think a lot of people agree with. I know the controller has talked about this in his reports, and that is we really need to come back to a community base. We need to involve the community in the first instance, and we need to get people invested and not feeling like it doesn't matter what they do, because people feel too defeated by the current process. And it's not giving us something better. It's not giving us better buildings. It's certainly not giving us better architecture. If you look around, just look up. Not much in the way of good architecture happening. And those impacts that, because of the way planning is done, the way ULURP is done, really doesn't force anybody to plan for kids, for schools, for the infrastructure, social and physical, our subways, our roads. Those are all afterthoughts, and clearly I know in the prior administration, when they came to IKEA, you know, one of the things Mayor Bloomberg said was, first you build it, then worry about the roads. And the reality is there aren't a lot of roads in Red Hook. There are 2 going in and 2 going out. You know, it's too late after the fact to worry about the fact that you have no roads. He disagreed with me and didn't really ask my opinion. You know, but if we continue to work together and have these conversations, we can start making a difference and come up with principles for development, things that we can agree on that needs to be that mix. Because really what makes a neighborhood work, what makes an area work, is the balance, right? It's the mix of uses and people and the ability of the infrastructure to handle the people and the lives of the people who live here and work here. You know, the downtown plan, the classic problem there was they thought it would be commercial. They thought it would be a total of 5 million square feet. I'm obviously a nerd on this, right? With about 1 million square feet of residential units, 973 units. What is currently built is 10,500 units, right? Because it turns out the market was not commercial, it was residential. We don't want to have that happen again. And what we need to do is work together to make sure that that doesn't happen again and that we find a better way to do this. You know, we don't have to be enemies, we can be friends and working together. Sorry.
No, and I'll just underline, look, I think the thing that makes a difference is an organized and mobilized and active community. That's really, I wish there were other like special safeties or different laws, but in this case, when Avery Hall came to say, here's our proposal, we're going to come to the community board, can you support it? I knew what community I was representing, right? I knew who would show up in this room. And so I wasn't, you know, fibbing or making it up. I was just like, you're going to have to come to the neighborhood. I have some gut on what you're going to hear when you do. And it's not really in that regard up to me. It's, you know, I wish we had, I think Joanne is right about plenty of the more systemic changes it would be great to make in how we do planning. But at the root of that kind of work is a community that mobilizes and organizes and stays attentive. And I wish there was a shortcut, but in democracy, that's what it takes.
You know, I want to also just say that, you know, Avery Hall has worked with us. And that's a huge, huge difference between something like Atlantic Yards, where the developer really did not work with the community at all and really spurned the community. That hasn't been the case here. And so we've been able to work with people and we've been able to live these principles and put them into effect to create a much better project that we think would be improved from the developer's point of view as well as ours.
I know we have one final question.
Good evening. My name is Abraham. My partners and I own and operate 3 supermarkets in the Brooklyn area, and we would definitely be interested in opening up a store of any
This is
size.
the man we want to hear from.
Of any size, cater to the community. So.
Great. We'll make sure we'll make sure your name is submitted for the RFP.
We manage Metropolitan City Market, Medfood, and Key Food.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, again, I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to ask everybody, please, 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 we really do want your input represented here. And I just want to say a big shout out, obviously, for community organizing engagement, but honestly, a big shout out to our elected officials for their leadership and being accountable to the community. Woohoo! Thank you all very, very much.